Down to Central. Our lovely quaint Central branch. Martha's not here. I hope she can go to the north side. Haven't heard anything. Okay, but we have no remote participant today.
No, we don't have any.
Okay. So first thing to get out of the way is the minutes of our April meeting. Did everybody had a chance to take a look at them? Questions or comments? Additions, corrections? If not, may I have a motion to accept them as presented?
I move that we accept them as presented.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. Announcements? By public comments?
I don't believe we have any public comment today. If anyone online would like to make a public comment, please use the Zoom raise hand function. Staff. Tony, I did belatedly an announcement, just the microphone for this room is in the middle here, and whenever we're recording here, people say they have trouble hearing board members speak, so as best as you can, enunciate and holler today.
Stare at the green.
Speak to the green light.
Yeah.
No public comment today.
All right, thanks.
Who's that?
So for our continuing education today, we got a presentation from Fred about the Monticello Avenue Digital Media Lab and Makerspace Services. You're up.
So I did this version of this for the all staff training day, and the staff got some stickers. So it's sort of been a question and answer format. And if you want to, you can play along and stick it at the end. No pressure. So it's a lot of alliteration, but the Makerspace Digital Media Module is what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. I'm here. Okay. So what do all these organizations have in common? Yeah, so they're all members of the Montreal Avenue Community Network. So formed in 1994. This is just like one of the ways that we, as an organization, have connected people with information. Primarily through our hosting to local organizations in Charlottesville. I think so. So what even is that? So the Montreal Community Network is a unique department at JMRL. So since 1985, we just like I said, we were right through hosting 10 not organizations in Charlottesville and County. It has its own website and next time. It also has a majority of information community. Basically, there's like 5% department staff. There's the historically it's called a coordinator, who is now a supervising technology services librarian. Historically called an internet specialist, who's now a digital media lab specialist. And then team Makerspace lab support staff, which were previously lab monitors. And so there's a lot of really cool things that we historically as a community needed. And thankfully, a lot of those organizations have like matured to a place where they don't need us to be the go-between. So we don't have to tell, like, you don't have to post through us that we need a pothole fixed, or that schools are closed, or any of those like historical ways that we were like posting that information. But one of the things that we have like continued throughout is like community focused digital literacy programming. So that might have looked like welcome to the internet classes back in the day, and the AI program today, or how to use a 3D printer, or one-on-one tutorial on how to use your device. So sort of that trend of connecting people with technology, it just like looks a little bit different today. So part part of what we doing the service, what the service involves, also means finding new places to house some of the information. So one of the really cool things that they did at the outset was these oral histories. And part of what that I did a year ago was connect with the Jefferson School of African American Heritage Center. Sorry. Name about like holding these like unique stories and making sure that they don't just live in what we have access to as a community. And so awesome. So what is a makerspace is a question that I get a lot. And I'm going to take you guys through it as well. So part of what reimagining this space did was there used to be 18 computer lab stations, right? And so transferring that into a digital media lab and then also changing 10 of those spaces into a makerspace. So we now have services, the appointments and walk-ins for the Glow Board, which is our laser cuttered creates, 3D and flat scanning, cassettes, VHS file digitization, 3D printing, sewing machines, and like Adobe Creative Suite as well as some of the open source tools as well. And people can come with their projects and we help them either learn around anything or get them where they need to go. And so there is immediately a quiz. So what can this machine make? And what's something that you'd like to make with it?
Good guess.
A Lego block.
Yeah, you could. It'd be a little bit of a harder mission, so. Yes, you could. Yeah, so you,
So this is a 3D.
it is, yeah, and I'll say that one next.
Uh,
Yay! So how it serves patrons, you can learn new skill. You could, it's a fun way to get teams in the door, get them excited about science and all that good stuff. You can also make gifts like the Mother's Day present in the corner, or a practical gadget. It also helps us as a system, like provide stuff for our like programs and stuff, like the Mario Kart tournament, like trophies are green, or 3D printed on that. What I showed you, or book repair tools, or yeah, all sorts of fun stuff. Door stuff, isn't it?
Door stuff. Thank you for the door.
Alright, and then what kind of projects could you make with this?
A dream burn.
Those are all really great. Yeah, so we have like a bunch of like, either if you're a beginner or you're trying to make clothes or you're trying to prepare something that you already have at home. We have beginner sewing classes because we found that that's, especially for like the new and home demographic, thing that missing and wanting. So we're starting in July and like sewing series, but we also have people that come in and just fix it up or make it do all of the things that you guys did.
How big are your classes? You're anticipating your classes to be?
So the one we had so far, it's partially limited by the size of the space. We're gonna do a little bit of a tour after this. Actually, I think after the whole meeting, unfortunately. But it is like we said, it's about 10 computer stations that are transformed into a makerspace. So it's about a 10-person camp. Depending on like it's like a digital media focused program, there's like 80 public computers so it has a built-in cap because of the size of the space. But it's a lot of fun. We were excited. So when we're running there, sewing machine from 1940 that their grandma gave them, and it's like, what's this? Okay. So this guy, does anyone know what this guy is?
This is
No, it's like a button maker.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so whether you're, this is a kind of cute one that came in where someone made like graduation buttons out there. It was for the parents of graduates and they had a little graduate's face on them so they could match the kid to the grad. But or just everyday things, so lots of fun stuff. And this is the digital should be fun. And does anyone know what kind of stuff that you digitize?
VHS tapes.
Yeah. Alright. We can also do cassettes, slides, and there's a LP converter reference as well. And what kind of scanners do we have?
Flatbed, 3D.
Yeah, thanks. Good job. Yeah, so those new scanners like transfer like that. Yeah, 3D to a 3D image. And so what does the glow board use to engrave and cut things?
Sorry.
Yeah, good job.
Well, I watch a lot of videos on Facebook.
Yeah, and so where you're like engraving like deceased relatives like recipe and their handwriting on the little cutting board, or they're just making some stuff for a whole program, or having an anti-Valentine's Day party. We got you.
Yeah, that's a great. Mask with them.
Yeah, so lots of fun stuff. One of the things I wanted to shout out was the Gordon Happening library team made like vinyl sticker cutouts for their lockers, which I think look cute. And just sort of like one of the ways in which we like can use it to support internal and external programming, because it's also a card making winter craft that's on there. So awesome stuff. Okay.
But it comes with Adobe.
I also yeah, that's public facing. We get that question sometimes. And then how we do all this stuff. There's the Public Niche Academy, which is kind of like a training platform. That also has little like, if you want to get started, we're gonna start. Do you guys have any questions?
You started off talking about the Monticello Avenue Community Network.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I fully understand. What's the relationship between that and the makerspaces?
Yeah, so it all lives on the mezzanine for full alliterative potential. So they're all things I can do.
Are they, is there a website for the community network? Like, I think the one that I found, because I have a tendency to be looking things up at the same time, seemed to, it didn't mention the makerspace, and so that was what was making me wonder, are these in different physical locations, like?
Yeah, no, so the lab only exists in like virtual space. And then it's housed in a location that is now transferred from just being a computer lab that also like so traditionally it's been a computer lab that also costs, and they took like 10 of those stations and like, turned it into a digital media lab at makerspace.
The Mon-Ave series actually stands, it's AVV, it's the Monticello Area Virtual Village. When it was formed in the 90s. So the policy committee, the reason that we've asked Fred to be here today is that the policy committee is going to be reviewing the Monticello Avenue policy starting in June, I think. That policy strictly deals with hosting services. So like Fred mentioned, you know, that it used to be when this came online in the 90s, and some local school systems, their website was hosted by JMRL. You know, we've seen dwindling usage of that over the last 20 years. So there's some conversations for the board to have, for staff to have about how much to continue to put resources into that and how much to transform the service into something that's more direct today for people's information.
Yeah, it was originally informed by the Charlottesville and Admiral jurisdictions, JMRL, UVA, Adelphia, and Sprint, so we're spanning in 1994.
I think Siri brings up a good point though. There is some confusion, I think, because of the branding that happened in the 90s.
Yeah.
This was it was like really cool that the library was providing these computer services, basically, that nobody really understood. But it was a place you could go. But now it's something different. So I think it is confusing in the community what what Monticello Ave is, really, and why it's even called Monticello.
I think that's one of the things that should be under discussion when the policy committee and then the full board looks at.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about? What are we calling
It's
that?
it's a makerspace, which, and people should know that the library has that. Cause Monticello Ave is, I mean, to a lot of people in Charlottesville. Restaurants, yes. So it's, I think it is important, because what you're doing there now is so creative. And the word, it's just very, I think it's confusing. We're missing out on.
One of the reasons that staff hasn't just rebranded this whole thing is because of the existence of this policy, which says we have this thing, Monticello.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the discussion, and that was one of the goals today, was to have Fred tell you what has been the past for Monticello Avenue, what's happening currently, and where it's going. So
And it's
the board
going
can help.
towards just solely in makerspace.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things to talk about. We still have what do you call it, clients, we have client organizations that are still using these hosting services, so we don't want to leave anybody high and dry. So there's some communication to do, but
even if we change the name.
even if we change the name, right? But right now, we are supporting hosting infrastructure with a server, that needs to be replaced with all these things. So the question is whether or not there's still a need for it. Like there's definitely not a need that there was in 1993 or 4. Or what that should look like.
How many people are we, how many organizations are we hosting?
Right.
Yep, so there are like 46 total sites, for about 30 client organizations, but I can look up the actual number and get back to you, I don't think I can say the wrong thing on here. But yeah.
No, that's a good rough estimate. I was curious if it was like 5 or 300. I mean, isn't there a lot of free hosting options now? I mean, you could get a WordPress and free.
Right, so some of these are through, some of them are WordPress sites that are hosted, that we host. So I think it depends on the organization, what resources they have access to. For example, if they're specifically nonprofit, there's specific resources, if there's specific PA, there's specific resources, and there's some people that seem to maybe not fall into some of those categories. So it kind of depends. But I think to your point about I think that's part of the reason why there's Belmont Oral History, right? As part of the creation of the project. And I think there's lots of marketing and branding opportunities, lots of things that are I think it's the same mission. It just kind of looks a little bit different 30 years later.
Yeah.
So a couple pieces that I also want to get my head around. When we're hosting these sites, we're operating a physical server on premises here somewhere in
At
the
the
greater administrative.
It's at the data center at City Hall, so
And I'll say it's also my sense.
Yeah, so God's lives at City Hall.
Right. So even if we want to continue providing the service, I think there would be a question right off the bat. Should we migrate that to a larger cloud service somewhere else where we're not operating in, we're paying for it, someone else to maintain and manage. And then these client organizations, if that was needed, could operate under, some sort of umbrella account. It is also my sense, maybe along the lines of what Meredith was bringing up, that this need for that, the availability of free alternatives is much different than it was 20 years ago or 10 years ago. So I wonder what, if we were to say, hey folks, we value your contributions to the community, but we think there's other ways for you to provide the same client services, and if we wrote a migration guide for that, what would that look like? What would the migration guide be, and what would the recommendations for those? So if we have that sort of migration guide as a working document or an exploratory document, say, we would at least know what that could look like from the standpoint of those client organizations, and we would know, hey, are we able to provide a valid alternative that's also, low impact because it's also cost free, and by the way, you have a dedicated team of AWS engineers or whoever it is, that are in the business of providing hosting, which I would not necessarily characterize as a core mission of our library.
You mentioned that UVA got into and out of free web hosting business several times over the past 3 decades. So if we want a resource to figure out how to get out of this conveniently and they'd be a good place to start.
I guess I'm just expressing, I would like to understand, if we wanted to explore that option, what would that look like from an impact on those client organizations? What would that look like? It's not clear to me that we've explored that. And I'd like to kind of, if we were making a decision, I'd like to understand what that possibility might look like. It sounds like, David, let me know if we're interested in exploring deprecating. I guess that happens all within policy committee. Is that?
I think that's the next step. I don't know if you had a chance. Did we look at it last month? I can't remember.
We did not open it up, and I think
You
I
sent
sent
it.
it.
you sent it, and I personally kind of chose not to really look at it because it's my understanding we're not doing the things that it's describing.
Yeah, I mean, some of those, we'll wrap it up next month. Some of those things we are still doing through the 30 member organizations.
And I guess the other question that probably is that would feed into that is what resources in terms of staff time and budgetary commitment are we devoting to whatever we want to call the Monticello Avenue network or the core, this core service. Again, I'm hearing that there's this sort of historic core service, and then makerspaces to me sounds like a separate thing. And I don't want to jump around too much, but are the makerspaces in Northside and Nelson, are those considered part of the same Monticello Avenue, or are they connected in the same way, or is it just because the central makerspace is now in a physical location where we used to do Monticello Avenue type activities?
Yeah, that's part of it. I think part of it too is transitioning the staffing that was responsible for one set of duties, was monitoring the computer lab and then running this. You kind of think about the virtual village aspect, that's the client organizations that we're hosting. So when my lab started, it was host these things, run this computer. Those two things you could say, well, they are two different services and they have different clientele. So as the need for both of those has changed over the years, we hired friends come on board to work on specifically, we've got a little room there. There were some other computers put in the building for the public use. We've seen a decrease in usage of public computers in the same way that they were like aughts or whatnot. Then it was about transitioning the folks working on it to try to meet the spirit of the mission, at least. Connect people to technologies. We're going to make sure that people have access to them. We're going to make sure that they get their hands on it. Some of them virtual, some of them physical. But I do think that the next step for the board is for the policy committee to look at this. So that's a good question you brought up about the other two makerspaces. But each of them are very specific. And the one at Northside is a teen makerspace. It's for teams, and the one in Nelson is a business center, but anybody can use it per se, but that was the intent from the beginning. So Fred has certainly shared expertise with the folks running both of those labs, with Zurita and Shannon at Northside, but they're not all under the Monmouth umbrella. That's specifically this department and what they're doing. So one of the things that the policy committee can look at is, do we need this policy at all, for one? If we're going to keep something here, what should the scope of it be? Should it be about makerspaces, or should it just be about what our plans are for the virtual village for the next few years? And all these questions that you all are talking about are questions that staff have had on the horizon for a while, so now's the time.
Yeah, I would be really curious about what the expense is of sort of keeping this server going for all these organizations, and kind of, I feel like times have changed, and probably most of these organizations would be able to probably find places for themselves, but I don't.
I'll send a list around things, some of them are very like. Small. Organizations, like a Girl Scout troop or something.
But I mean, you can get a free WordPress site.
Yeah.
For not that much, if you're just needing to have a place to put, you know, when's the next Girl Scout meeting or something.
One of the
But I
things,
feel like we're maybe spending a lot of money for something that we're not getting a lot of credit for. Cause I don't feel like the whole community knows that we're doing this, like it's the JMRL logo on all these sites saying like, this is provided by the library, like I don't think we're getting. So I don't know if we're getting a lot of bang for it up there, but that being said, separating it from the makerspace itself, I think the makerspace sounds so cool. And it would be great to see. And using it, I'm glad there's gonna be sewing classes and that sort of stuff, because I think a lot of young people are really interested in making stuff.
And the trend is the other branches will develop maker spaces also.
space is an issue.
Right,
You know, we
but is Louisa interested in that?
I honestly cannot speak on that one right now.
Yeah.
Space.
yeah, they don't have a dedicated space for it, it would have to be more like we looked at carts and things, you know, how libraries do that, there's something you can roll in and out, maybe, so you can have like makerspace programming, but not a dedicated
Like no.
space.
Yeah,
not
which it's also,
space.
you could have a dedicated space and not a person to run it. So,
Yeah.
so it's,
I think it's gonna help to go on this tour this afternoon to see what Fred's got.
And if you have a cart, you still have to store the cart somewhere.
Yeah,
It's a problem with that.
So from my perspective, it's super obvious the virtual village should be phased out, like, it's just a 1990s thing. But I think the makerspace is really interesting, and you know, if you think about why would a library have a makerspace, right? It's there's the right, the sharing of resources of computers and machines that an individual may not be able to afford. There's sort of the digital literacy, which, you know, is bringing machines together with teaching so that people in the community can learn how to use these technologies.
Yeah, there's a major education.
Yeah, and then, right, and there's also the sort of notion of helping people within the community shift from being consumers to producers, right? So it's like, it's in fostering a sort of a culture of creativity, and you can actually make things. And to that end, I'm kind of curious if the makerspace staff have relationships with other organizations in the area that enable people to create things. So like the Charlottesville Tool Library is an example. My daughter's recently got into glass blowing, right? So there's other things in the community that folks who are in the makerspace, I would imagine, are the kinds of people who might be interested in what else is out there. So I'm just curious if.
Yeah, I mean, I was personally, I was looking for my Saturday. But yeah, so part of what like, I've been here a year. Part of what I was like trying to do is like taking those community partnerships,
Yeah.
obviously, and like see what like the future could hold. But also making it sustainable so that I really don't have community partners that are able to like create and sustain a service for our patrons.
Yeah, I think having the policy committee address the overall concept of the community and Monticello Avenue policy in general, I think it's a great place to start. Because, yeah, I mean, obviously we need to make sure that all of our programming and all of our services are up to date. And that we're not spending money and time on things that nobody's using anymore, or, you know, make us look old. We don't want that.
but I think even the part, you know, the virtual village where we've been hosting these, you know, small, minute groups, we can't just say, well, you can do it over there.
Right.
But, you know, maybe just walk them through, maybe.
And to that point, and to what somebody said over here too, I think one of the reasons that people use the virtual village to begin with wasn't just that here's the free space, it was that here's somebody to help you do this. And so that's what I think coming out of COVID, my thinking was, oh, we're gonna get rid of this virtual village and we're gonna transition this space and do these other things. And then somebody pointed out to me that one of the organizations was running like streaming services. It was like a church running Sunday services or something. So we can't just pull the rug out. on these folks that have been relying on this, and I have no idea that this is being discussed.
Yeah.
So it has to be something along the lines of, here's the plan, and we're starting early, but in order to do that, staff needs to know that the board from the policy level is okay with that transition.
Well, I mean, I think the website hosting has gotten. Starts free if you have such a tiny site, but also it's gotten so much easier to use that, you know, probably Fred in about 2 hours could learn one of the programs and be able to transmit it. I mean, honestly, they're very easy, they're very like, but I'm just saying, it's like, it's one of those things where.
A lot of these boards use social media for the same purposes now, they have a Facebook page that does what.
But I would just react to what you're describing, and I think this is important, and Peter mentioned the words digital literacy also. You can have experts or people that in programs and office hour type services and ask a librarian. You can have that guidance and knowledge sharing without having the physical host somewhere. The knowledge can be, it's from the client standpoint, it's almost the same thing. I'm going to instruct you, here's where you telnet in and set your files, and it's on JMRL server. Well, I'm telling you the same thing, but you're just putting it on a different free cloud server. From their standpoint, they're just putting their file somewhere and it works. The digital literacy component is, to me, in my mind, separate from that. We have to physically provide the hosting space. We have that layer to be swapped out in my mind.
And to your point, like the library work here had like website support as like a walk-in, like
Right.
one type of rooms and service.
So the goal today was to bring Fred up, talk about what we're doing, where we've been, where we're going. I think that's a good conversation, good place to start.
I'm looking forward to the tool.
Yep.
Hey, next up, finds and fees working group report.
We met last week and continued to look over the metrics and kind of fine tune them. We are prepared at this time to support a staff recommendation of implementing auto renewals with the target date of July 1st. And then David's going to talk more on what that would include and not include. At this time, we're still investigating we're not ready to make a motion on removing the fines. We're still working on that aspect. And one of the things is creating a roadmap of how this going to look when we are ready to move forward, make a recommendation to the board and timeline. So some progress. We have at least one more meeting.
And we also had a brief discussion about the collection agency that JMRL is currently using, and I think there was some interest there in taking that away. When JMRL signed up for this service, it was a very cost-effective thing because they could communicate better with our patrons, and we have better tools now. So I think the working group, when we're talking about that, kind of decided that that's probably an operational decision, but it's of enough impact that that I would want the board to be able to hear.
Yeah, so under new business, we do have one macro's discussion and potential book. So thank you, Randy.
So I had something, so I was watching a little bit of the video from the working group meeting, and it wasn't super obvious to me from some of the comments that that you folks have digested some of the research that's out there about what other libraries have experienced from going fine free. So I just want to share a perspective. So back in 2020, when I was still living in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I remember when our library went fine free, and I was kind of surprised because I thought, I mean, I was raised by an authoritarian father. I'm totally familiar with the philosophy of like, if people won't be good if you don't punish them. And so I was like, whoa, like, why are people going to return their books? And so I just did some Google searches and looked at what other, and there was research out there back then of other, and the evidence is counterintuitive that, you know, it's very easy to think, who's going to return their books if they're not going to get fines? And yet the evidence is that, you know, there's either a negligible difference, like it's just kind of continues business as usual. People return books pretty much the same as they did. Or in some cases, people are returning books even better than they did before. And so I just wanted to say that there is research out there. I did a quick search this morning, like, I found a really nice report, 10-page PDF that's, to me, looks very well done. That asks and answers questions like, are daily fines required as an incentive for patrons to return materials? And the overall answer is no. They return them anyway. Do fine-free policies lead to increased circulation? And the answer is yes. And so there's quite, I won't go through this report, but there's quite a lot of statistics at an overview level of what libraries across the country experienced, and also, in this report, individual libraries and the statistics that they collected. High Plains Library District reported a 16% circulation increase. New York Public Library, 37% higher. And so, again, I just want to make sure that as we're sort of moving towards making a decision on this, that we're not only looking at what metrics do we have, but that we're recognizing that there's a bunch of metrics out there that other libraries have collected and shared. And unless we're casting doubt on what they're sharing, we should be taking that into account. So I'm happy, I actually sent this to David earlier, but I can share this, send this around. And there was another one I came across, just in the 5 minutes I searched, which also made a very different case of, this was an announcement when Ann Arbor District Library and our neighboring district library, Ypsilanti, eliminated fines, where they talked about one of the key purposes being to encourage equity and inclusion, right? So there's a different, kind of sense of mission there, reason why they were doing it. And there's research there that talks about some of the inequity that can be involved in fines, because they're a much bigger deal to people who don't have money than the people who do. So anyway, I'll share that too.
Thank you. Yeah. I know all these issues have come up that we've talked about, and of course, there's the logistical issue of we have this pot of money that we get from this, and we've replaced it with something. I think that's a much clearer issue. But I always had the anecdotal sense that this was not something that was going to make our collection all of a sudden disappear from the shelves, type of thing.
But do these policies, Peter, do they have an underlying hold on a library card if somebody just has excessive amounts of books that they're not returning?
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
wondering about that too.
you can speak to that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any library that's gone fine-free, but hasn't had some sort of block on account for materials on it.
And then
It's not like, some of those points are, some libraries it's like a year, some of them it's a month or two.
Yeah, so you can't just hold on to books forever. That's not,
No.
we're not gonna allow that.
Just talk to university.
Yeah, right.
Citation yet.
Yeah, right. 10 years.
I was very annoyed when
No one else wants it, right?
I was very annoyed when I retired from UVA that I no longer check out books forever. Now I only have them for a year. And so,
That sounds wrong.
thank you.
David, another part from the meeting that I felt like you wanted to revisit was the sort of the preferred timeframes.
Yes.
There was some discussion at our last board meeting, and then there was a further, you kind of.
Yeah, so at the last board meeting, Peter, you asked, does the timeline matter? And my answer was no, it's a board decision. But in thinking about it later, I realized that, to Tony's point, we are talking about our budget cycle and the budget cycle of our jurisdiction. So ideally, those things line up on a July 1 schedule, and obviously we're not gonna get anything done by July 1. It sounds like there's some impetus for the board to make some decisions here before July 1, 2026. But we did discuss that ideally these things line up on this week, because we are making a fiscal year with decisions about revenue.
And I have another question. When you go further on this fine-free policy, I mean, my understanding from what we talked about at the budget meeting, is that JMRL anticipates fewer fines anyways, because more and more people are taking the books out for children fines on that. So will there be a study of what we're, you know, what we would be missing in the future, what the fee loss would really look like?
Yeah,
Today,
I do think that's something that we wanna look at a little more, is what is that difference going to be? Because there is specific things that fines pay for, such as our vehicles. If I'm not mistaken,
computers. Anyways,
so,
Jerry's already worked on projects off and on for the last year or so, so he did new information all the time. If this grant, working through the year or beginning of the year.
I mean, in other words, fines are becoming more obsolete anyways.
We're gonna have to figure out, the organization's gonna have to figure out a reliable way to buy equipment, regardless of what the decision is about overdue funds.
Yeah.
Wasn't the discussion that they was moving to the jurisdictions?
Well, that would probably require reopening the original equipment.
Okay.
And you're, it's specific.
We're not gonna do that.
Well, it gets reviewed every 5 years, and it's part of the discussion. I can, if I'm one of our funding jurisdictions, I'm not jumping at the bit to take on something that you have been taking on, but the truth is that we do buy equipment from the operating budget, you know, as needed. We bought softwares and things, you know, there's nothing that says that we can't use jurisdictional funding to buy equipment, but the regional agreement says that we specifically have an equipment fund to support the equipment needs of JMRL that's funded by these revenues.
Okay. Well, I can also take that explanation. What Anne was talking about, saying we don't have as many fines or fees any longer because it's gonna continue. And it's gonna continue to happen. So obviously, we're not, the need for computers is not gonna go away at this point.
I think it can be paid out of state funding too, right?
Yeah, you can use state aid for that, and the other thing we'll talk about is our friends at the library. Now funding back this year, we're gonna ask them to support some more.
It's a fairly modest percentage of the overall budget.
Oh, yeah, correct, yeah. Which is a great segue to the next item on the agenda, which is the Budget and Finance Committee report.
The Budget and Finance Committee met earlier this month, May 8th, and with the specific purpose of reviewing the fiscal year 2026 equipment budget. And you have a copy of that. And we went through line by line and, you know, the discussion of, you know, yay or nay, and mostly yay. But there were a couple of things that was moved from this current list, from the current list to for the Friends. And those were, speaking of our Monticello Avenue, because they were the digital laptop and the and what else was
gaming laptop.
the game, yeah, both of those were from the Monticello. Anyway, but they were specifically like for the programming, and that's why they rather than just playing, you know. But anyway, so I think the equipment, the list that you have in front of you is, this is what we are what the committee is recommending the board to look at and approve for the 2026 budget.
You worry about the size of the government?
I think it's just traffic.
Let's go with
Let's
that.
call it real stereo.
Yeah.
To remind the board, June, there'll be a vote on the entire budget, which they budget the part. So the June, it's very important to get it, or in June.
So is the server replacement, the server talking about?
It is the server.
Oh. Just kidding. That's an expensive.
Servers.
Huh?
Servers are expensive.
If we didn't replace that right now, how long would it continue to function
It's passes and like.
But it's functioning today, people's websites are being hosted.
So, yeah, it could be 2 years, it could be.
2 minutes.
I'm just saying, in an environment where we talk today about possibly deprecating that service, and we have a couple months of
Like.
margin, well, a margin, a window where we can make that decision. And I guess that partly, even if we made a decision tomorrow, I guess there would be a transition period. Okay.
So the budget committee talked about this a little bit, and my goal would be to have it included so that you could buy it.
Right.
That's the decision, but if you don't include it, then you don't. Which is fine, we'll do that. Discussion.
Understood. So the point is, you're not committing to buying one, you're
Putting it in
budgeting for that possibility. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go.
Other comments from the budget finance committee? In your handouts, there's the draft of the fiscal year 26 board meeting and budget discussion. Now we will display on the main screen.
Carol. We did this year, in previous years we have not, but it's the board's choice.
One of the things that always an issue is we usually move the Thanksgiving meeting to the week before Thanksgiving, and then that means that then you've got a long stretch till the December meeting, which is, if it's going to be on the 29th, you know, that's 6 weeks probably.
A lot of people are out of town.
Yeah, the 29th was the minutes.
There's two holidays.
I think it's this part this year because it's either week of Christmas or right after Christmas.
So we had a meeting on that. It's not bad.
Not that bad.
So it's a week early for Thanksgiving, which I think that's what I'm hearing is the board would like to have it a week early instead of Thanksgiving week. So Christmas is on what day of the week? Friday, I think, Thursday. So you're either meeting Monday before Christmas is on Thursday, or you're meeting Monday after. Which one is?
Well, you could meet on the 15th, which would be 2 weeks early, but it's
But
all,
then it offsets January.
Yeah, then
Well, January, yeah.
the January.
January's Christmas.
no, it's on.
26.
Yeah, it's just, do you want a long gap between November and December, or a long gap between December and
The
January?
time where we really use the gap is between October and November, when we're doing budget work, but that's not an option. So it really doesn't matter, I mean, the board has the option to skip the December meeting too.
No.
Go on without meeting.
What was that, the year without Santa Claus?
Virtual meeting, I heard, we're working a virtual meeting once, I think the FOIA allows for one time a year, as long as it's properly noticed to have a virtual meeting.
It could be
I mean, I would prefer it to be the Monday before Christmas. But that's just.
Only if David dresses up in Santa suit. That's what I was saying.
I can provide snacks. Does anybody else have a strong feeling, or is that the consensus?
I mean, obviously, there's travel and holidays involved, no matter when you schedule these things. And like, I mean, one of the main reasons I lobbied to have the Thanksgiving meeting moved a week back was I am always out of town the week of Thanksgiving. So.
And in terms of the board's budget schedule, the Thanksgiving meeting is more important than the Christmas meeting. Because the Thanksgiving meeting is when we will adopt a proposed budget that then we give right away.
And Louisa's done early in
And
December,
they
so.
they like to meet early. And then we have to turn around and tell them, here's what changed, because we didn't get to.
Healthcare.
Healthcare.
Yes, it's up 40%.
So.
So is the consensus that we'd rather have it before Christmas rather than after?
I would think the 22nd would be a better date than the 29th, because if you have people that travel for Christmas and want that last week at the end of the year, you're gone through New Year's,
In all the schools.
so.
And the board can always revisit this, you know, we're setting it down, let people know and kind of just ask them, here's when things need to happen, but if you decide to have a virtual meeting, then that's okay.
All right, so we're more or less, we'd like the new draft to reflect like on the 22nd.
And I think Martha had a suggestion too, am I correct about this, about adding the policy committee?
Yeah, that was because the policy committee is
Is
a
there
pretty
a
regular.
schedule?
Yeah,
That makes sense to me now that it's back. I think it was a little, you know, during COVID, they got off track a little bit, but now we're pretty set on that. So just be adding, starting in August, some sort of language that says policy meeting prior to the full board meeting and that period. So August, October, December.
We usually stick to that pretty regularly, but every once in a while, there's one that changes. Is this something that's how would that accommodate?
I think as long as we publicize,
As long as we notice it, this is not a set in stone.
Right, the requirement by law is the actual like agenda posting and noticing, you know, this is just good for everybody to know, but if that changed, we could, there is a version of this that's up on the board's website, we could just swap that out.
I guess I'm asking, is this something we're voting on or just sort of having a consensus discussion of what do we want to see?
Trying to remember if in the past you voted, because certainly vote on the days closed. I don't think there's a requirement to vote on this, but you certainly could.
Right. No, if we did vote on it, then I would feel like it's a little more set in stone, so that sounds fine, it sounds great. Okay.
So Christmas changed.
No, Christmas not changed.
December meeting, that's changed.
The Christmas meeting is.
Santa.
The December meeting is here. And
It's the meter.
policy. Okay, so then staff will just take care of that and then distribute this to you all and post it on the board trustees page, basically.
Good, thank you. On the new business, we have a second reading of policy 4.1 book review. And in your handouts. We really good run through of this, updated not only the text, but I think the tone of it as well.
Yes, so we definitely, as we work through every policy, we're trying to update the tone and make it user friendly for the audience. We're trying to identify who are the stakeholders that we're trying to communicate with for this policy. So it's guidance around staff for the stakeholders, but also for the public, what are we offering and what are the parameters? And then we try and strike a balance of not being too prescriptive in terms of the operational details. We want to give public enough information about the general parameters and want to give staff general parameters, but then let them implement the specific details. And then, as you see the last line here, there's usually a web page where the staff has worked out those exact details and then publish those in a way that can be changed or tweaked later on. So, phone is was. No, well, actually, I didn't want to. It was not, so it's still okay. So we talked to this last month, but the general idea is just identifying what mobile library services are and what their purpose are and connects to our mission. For the public, it's mostly implemented currently by this facility called the Bookmobile. So what is the Bookmobile? Then just scrolling down through services. What are things you can expect from mobile library? Here's services that the Bookmobile offers, and some things that generally you have to go through a branch and we're not able to offer through a Bookmobile. Making a distinction between regularly scheduled stops and then also the Bookmobile, we're letting everyone know is available as availability dictates for outreach events, come to your festival or school, football game or whatever it is, depending on availability. We can modify the schedule, and that's based on community input and with these sort of general criteria we use to review and modify that schedule periodically. And then just some notes about availability for weather type situations, a note about, well, why do we, that the bookmobile is available in some jurisdictions and not universally, just based on, that's because it's funded separately by jurisdictions or specifically. And then we may have other modes, mobile services, not specifically the bill. There is one in Nelson Library, outreach vehicle that is named Violet. So we did not put the name Violet in the policy. Yeah, that could be changed at any moment, but just interesting detail here. That's the name. And then links back out for how do you learn more and submit forms to request changes and so forth.
Other discussion about the policy?
I think it's really good that you did mention that the stops, the regular stops were like funded by the jurisdiction. And if they're in a different jurisdiction, maybe enough of the people would say, we want it too,
Yeah. And that's similar, as a side note, correct me if I'm wrong, to just the number of hours that some facility is open. Yeah, that's funded also by the jurisdiction. They've staffed that facility or that branch. That's a jurisdictional branch with a certain amount of hours. And so it's just in that sense, this is a branch that's being staffed for certain hours by certain jurisdictions and so forth. So it's very parallel in my mind.
One thing that the policy committee talked about, and this is more of a procedural thing, but there wasn't prior to this discussion, an online form for people to request a regular stop. There was more of an email that went out to the manager, or sometimes you could contact me or use our other contact forms, and now that's up and live, because this policy says you have to have a way to request the service, so I was happy to see that.
I really like keeping the word bookmobile, but also framing it as mobile library services, which just makes me want to like brainstorm about what else could the library do, librarians on motorcycles or drones or
Bikes, talking about bikes quite a bit.
Yeah,
And
in the city school.
We have access to those bikes. They're at Summit in the.
Yeah.
And Peter, that suggestion to kind of expand the definition to mobile library services came from the manager. You come to the exact job description, the job title. Maybe you want to. Yeah. She's the bookmobile services coordinator, but she, from the staff involvement, she offered that perspective. Yeah, carried forward.
May I have a motion to accept policy 4.41 as presented?
I'll move. See. 4.41. Mobile library services.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, great. All right, nominating committee discussion. We had folks raise their hands and say they want to be on the nominating committee. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ed.
So I think the only thing to discuss is that Ian and I will be calling each of you to get perspectives on board officers for next year, and please answer the call when it shows up on your screen.
Yeah, report to John.
Right, and I will say we actually popped up in the bylaws and try to understand exact parameters. And if I recall correctly, the bylaws say that the board will vote each June on officers for that year. So that's something we could put into future agenda items, but it's not just we think it's a good time to do it. That's what the bylaws say we're going to do.
And it's just 2 offices, resident.
Correct.
So when we talk to you, and I talked to some of you already, let us know, not just this year, but generally, like you would be available to hold an office down, or interested, I guess. Interested in.
And I will remind everyone, the president of the library board exempts you from serving on committees.
Not all committees. because some of us have a committee obligation because of our jurisdiction that we represent.
Yeah, that's something I was going to uncover, because it does not restrict you from serving.
Right, that's not restricted.
So,
Yeah.
Well, on that note, so, this is the first year in a while where the only seat that's available on the board, so unless somebody drops out, is Meredith's, and that's not till September, so we're expecting some board continuity. It's also in the beginning of the fiscal year, Tony's job to name committees
Right.
as well, so it's not really a part of this nominating committee's work. But if you have thoughts or interests or hopes or dreams about that, you find out who the new president is, the new president will set Tony's job, but whoever the new president is will set the committees. If you have thoughts about that, you can let us.
And thank you, Mike and Ann, for following. So we've already had some discussion about the fines and fees and automatic renewals. We put in here for a potential vote because David was thinking about it and trying to align it with fiscal year calendar. If we take the fines and fees working group proposal to turn on automatic renewals, it makes a whole bunch of sense to do it on July 1st, and that would require a vote of the board to do as of July 1st. Have I made that?
Yeah, that's about right. I think if the board would have voted their June meeting, there wouldn't be enough time there to notify the public about what's happening between the June meeting and July 1st, so we probably have to. If the board decides that they want to vote next month, then probably the date would have to move until August 1st or whatnot. Just there needs to be, I think, at least 5 or 6 weeks to message this to the public.
Yeah.
So the proposal that staff have is for automatic renewals, to keep the same 3-week loan period, which is what we currently have. So you check an item out, you give it 3 weeks with a few exceptions. There are bestseller copies and there are interlibrary loans that have different loan rules that don't go out for 3 weeks. But almost everything checks out for 3 weeks. And we currently offer 2 available renewal periods, and that would be the proposal moving forward. It's 3 weeks, and then any eligible item you could renew for 3 more weeks, and then 1 more time for a total of 9 weeks, 3 periods. Items would not be eligible for automatic renewal if they were on hold for another patron, so another patron was requesting them and waiting for them. If you were at the end of your renewal cycle, so if you'd reached the 9-week period there, or if they're non-renewable items, like I just mentioned, the bestsellers and certain items. So that's the proposal. Staff has been talking about how to make that work, what it would look like, and done some background on it. Pros and cons I was asked about. We'll start with the cons. To me, the biggest one is initial confusion over the change. So customer service issues, that people don't realize that not all of their items are renewable. I have a concern about this, but I think that it would basically take a little bit of time, and then people would get used to it basically. So my fear is that people will see an email and just say, oh, it's from the library, we have auto renewals, everything's been renewed. I'm done here, and not realize that they still want something that needed to come in. I would hope that that's only happened once, and staff will probably be instructed to have some sort of grace period for the first time that this happens, so that people can understand here's how the new system works. Loss of revenue, there is money that comes in, so if something's overdue and gets returned late or renewed late, it was due on Friday, you don't realize it until Monday, you owe 25 cents a day for that period. So the revenue there was about $17,000 last year and about $19,000 the year before, so somewhere in that range of money not coming in. There is a concern that I heard that materials may stay with the borrower longer. I can't quantify that, I don't know that is the case. I don't know how you think of that happening. In my mind, it's the same rules. Somebody may not be as hot to trot to get back in to return something if it gets automatically renewed, but we would allow them to renew it anyway, it just saves them trouble.
And they will be notified that it's been renewed, right? So they'll get a reminder like it's due,
Yeah, you'll get a courtesy notice. Right, saying these items are available to be, you have items too, we're renewing the ones that we can, here's what we couldn't. And people will have to react to it. So the benefits are largely customer service related, the working group has been talking about addressing barriers to access, so the first is convenience, patrons don't have to take the extra step. To renew things that they are eligible to renew, that, they could just call or go online to renew, they don't have to take that step. The second is accessibility for those that have limited access, either to transportation or the physical building, or to get online in order to renew things. We make it a little easier for these folks that otherwise would have to figure out a way to make that happen. And a third is just, this is an intermediary step in the direction of going Fine Food that the board has been talking about for a while. It's just a convenience factor for people. It's to get them used to, you can have these things as long as you do them without the penalties being there for that period. That's what I have on my list.
Comments? Not great, so we've talked length about this in the past few meetings.
It's setting it up. Getting it all set up by July 1st, that's not a problem.
Now is enough time to get that set up.
Tomorrow? No.
July 1st.
Yeah, there's some testing that needs to be done about just to figure out exactly what notice schedule we're gonna use. We're gonna talk about this a little bit. We could send as many as 6 notices. We want to try to find the sweet spot there where it's not too much for people are tell you guys but enough that they understand that these materials need.
In different colors too in the email. Notices.
So I mean, these are procedural things, whereas what I think what we're talking about here is policy.
Right, no, I was just curious that they could,
Yeah.
they could roll it out and we're saying, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
You guys are.
And just to be sure, I understood when you introduced this, you said staff have recommended this, right? So the working group has sort of said, yeah, we're in support of what the staff is recommending. And so when we're voting, we're sort of deciding if we support the staff recommendation.
Yeah, I think I'm looking for, that would be fine.
All I'm saying is that it's not like this is just coming from the board. We're just deciding on something without consulting the staff. Like this is actually
This
service
was
process.
also recommendation, yes.
Peter sent around policies with other jurisdictions, which was helpful. I thought, it was really helpful to see how simple they were. Really. So, but is this a policy? So, do we make a policy?
I don't think we would make a policy. I think the things that would change. I'm trying to think of
our jurisdiction have.
Those policies were kind of more like frequently asked questions things. They were more definitely designed for telling the public, like, here's how this is gonna work.
Yeah.
So we will do
So
some
we'll
of that. Yeah.
Send that out too.
And a lot of our newsletter, PR about it.
I think it'd be some great PR, it's like,
Yeah.
providers taking a burden off.
Well, this crazy thing.
Crazy.
So kind of the same question, just are we voting on something and what are we voting on? I don't think we're voting on policy.
We're not voting on policy,
I think so.
we're not voting on procedure, but we're voting on sort of a direction, I think.
Right, well, I think we're voting to endorse the staff, as an
Staff.
operational step, is that?
That sounds good. Usually in the spring, the board reviews and votes on the fines and fees policy, which is a schedule.
Right.
And it doesn't go to the policy committee, it just gets reviewed by the whole board. That we've kind of been sitting on because this whole conversation is going on. At some point, that needs to be reviewed, but I don't think that has overdue in there. But even if it does, the board would have to vote on it, it's time to vote on it.
Even if it does, there still is an overdue fine, if it's on hold and you don't get on, it's just that we're clicking the button for you automatically, so you don't have to click it when it's available for you to be clicked.
Yeah, I think what we're voting on is, what we're voting on is to go with the staff recommendation that we turn on automatic renewals for
Eligible items.
thank you, eligible items as of July 1st, 2025. I don't know if that's a motion or not.
I move.
All those in favor?
I second.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm gonna be really interested here to see how this comes out in the minutes, that's good.
Thumbs up. The motion was passed.
All right, great. Library director's report.
All right. Okay, so I have an item that actually probably would have been, something for the budget committee to discuss, but it only happened at the end of last week before it got to the budget committee, so I'm bringing it to you here. State aid, our final, state aid estimate is here, for next year, and it's not as much as we were hoping for going into next fiscal year. It's not official until the library board for the state of Virginia votes on it. So the increase that we were hoping for didn't happen statewide. We're not at full funding of state aid. And also there were some changes in other jurisdictions that diluted the piece of the pie. There was a regional library system where one of the systems left one of the counties. So now it's 2 systems that need to be accounted for. So everybody got a little bit less throughout. The bottom line was about a 1.4% decrease from what we had budgeted. No, I'm sorry. JMRL share is down a bit from the current year, so our overall share is down about 1.4%. We budgeted optimistically, but we had plans for this contingency. All along, we knew that there was a chance that the state wouldn't fully fund. So the final budget we'll see in June will reflect this decrease. It's about $90,000. The amount for books and materials that we budgeted for won't change. That's not being removed. If you recall, this was the first year that we put in a line in the budget for state aid to support. The first year in many decades, we put in a line to support salaries using state aid. So the primary amount will come from that. Some of it will come from the amount that we use to get materials for our materials, like stickers and Mylar covers and things like that. So we're looking at not quite as much as we're hoping for, but we're anticipating that there'll be open positions enough to cover the difference, plus some other operational budgetary adjustments. For example, the rent for the North Side branch is not going to be quite as much as we had budgeted for next year. So there's some funding there for the North Side portion of the. So I think that this is a doable situation. If not, the budget committee will reassess mid-year and come back and look and say, actually, we're going to need to make some choices for the second half of the year about reallocating resources. But for the time being, what it means is that the full budget that you get next month is going to be $90,000 shorter in the total amount, and then in that line for state aid for salaries and a little bit in the supplies. Any questions? The reason this didn't go to the budget committee again is because we just heard this on Thursday. So. Okay.
I've asked, there's something that I'm still vague on a little bit. So you could have chosen, so our materials budget, I think, is up over the last 4 or 5 years because that state has been up. And so our collection, I assume, is healthier in some sense than it was 5 years ago, which we've been able to allocate more money for. And you've made a choice, and I'm not saying it's that I think it's good or bad because I don't know. That's part of the question. But I'm interested in understanding more about how do we assess this quality or health of the collection to know, because we could have chosen to go back to a level that we were at 5 years ago, when maybe we had a healthy collection also, in whatever metric or way you want to describe that, and retained the allocation of part of the state aid towards the salary project. So again, how, I'm putting you on the spot, so I'm not looking for a detailed analysis right now, but I'm just expressing, I think something I've expressed in the past, is just understanding how do we decide whether our collection is in good shape, or if it can sustain a reduction in funding, or if it needs an increase in funding. Implicitly, that decision was made here, and I just don't understand how. Is it a general feel type of thing? Is it a customer sentiment type of thing where we've got, we don't have any complaints and we think we're in good shape? Are there more detailed metrics about hold times or what? I don't know. So again, I guess I'm not looking for it. It wouldn't be fair to ask for a detailed answer right now, but I'm interested in that remains a kind of an open question in my mind.
So maybe make an agenda item in the June meeting to have, because we're gonna vote on the budget in June anyway. So before we vote on the budget, let's have, perhaps make sure we know it, okay, it is $90,000 and it's coming out here. So that, I mean. Your question about collection and do we have a good collection, do we have a bad collection? That's not valid. That's one of those touchy-feely nebulous things that we charge the circulation folks and collection folks with knowing type of thing. I mean, they obviously have that kind of, yes.
Actually, I also wasn't gonna say anything, but I will. I mean, there are metrics that you can apply, but I don't think there's any one metric, right? Because you could look at the most popular books and how often, like the whole times and right, like all of us get frustrated when like the new cool book comes out and you have to wait a month to get it. Right, and every library struggles with that, but that's a metric of right how many copies of the new bestsellers is the library able to buy. But that's really different than things like depth and breadth of the collection, where are we supporting the needs of someone who's doing research in a particular area, and it might not be a very popular book, but it might be deemed as important. It's an important topic. So as soon as you start to look at those different kinds of metrics, it becomes more art than science, I think.
Well, I'm certain there's a balance, and there's a balance in fact with any sort of objective functioning that's for a complex system. But I would not say that funding is irrelevant. If we said, oh, state aid is going away tomorrow, and we can only, or it's getting cut in half, I feel like that would be an emergency we would say, hey, we need to replace some of that to sustain a collection of the quality we want, whatever that means of what we want. So I think it's absolutely the collections team uses the funding that we're able to give them to make the best use of it and come up with the best mix. But also we're making decisions about how much funding to give them, right, implicitly, right? So it definitely is tied together. But I agree, it's complex, which is why it's.
I mean, the board has gotten CDs, AC, and it's from areas in the past about data-driven collection decisions and like here metrics. And like working groups been talking about one of them, you're talking about that turnover rate.
Right, turnover
rate.
Right.
Yeah, as opposed to it's true.
But I'm recalling that, and the question that was in my mind was also at that time, which was my takeaway from that is, given the level of funding, here's how she made the best use out of it. She used data to make the best use of that.
That's always going to be the case.
It is. I mean, all those years that we only had maybe 50-60% of what we were supposed to get.
Yeah.
Right, she still made the best out of that. But again, my question is a separate thing: is what is the level that we need? Because right now we're choosing to keep that level where it is, rather than continuing on the path of allocating something to the staff project.
So are you asking for the board to make a different decision there?
I'm not informed about, because I'm not informed about what is necessary from a funding level to have a solid collection. I'm not in a position to say that the decision is good or bad. I'm trusting your expertise and judgment and experience and I feel like it's probably a fine, good decision. I just don't have much visibility on, hey, if we cut this spot, so what percent, let's say the board said, well, let's hypothetical, it's so important to maintain that staff initiative, we want to earmark that, and we want you to take this, whatever that dollar amount is, out of the materials budget instead. My question in my mind would be, well, you would say, okay, we can do it, or you'd say, well, we can do it, but that's going to affect our collection in this way, and we're going to have these issues with the collection against a trade-off. But I don't understand what those issues would be, or how we would understand that, no, we can't sustain a 20K cut to the materials budget, or 200K cut, whatever it would be. All right, that's it. Again, it's a question in my mind, and so I'm mostly putting in everyone else's mind. It's just, how do we understand the strength of the collection? communicating to you as an area of interest, possibly for a CE if we have that, but just, I don't have much visibility. I'm just identifying, I don't have much visibility about how the allocation choice was made here. We allocated, and we had two pots, and we chose a slider bar at one level to put money out of it, less money in one instead of less money in the other. We had a constraint, and we chose this position as a slider bar, and I just don't have a good understanding of what drives into why that slider bar position is the right place. I'm assuming it's the right place, but I don't have a great under.
So some of this money will be absorbed just because we over budgeted.
It's not over, yes,
I mean-
it's not over budgeting, but we're budgeting for full staffing, and we know going into the year that on day one.
Yeah, so some of this 90,000 will be absorbed now.
Correct, and it's in the operational end of the budget, which, you know, traditionally we have treated state aid as this is our book budget.
Yeah.
You know, so salaries have always been in the overall operational end of it, so in my mind, you know, that's the place that we would recruit, you know, if there are savings in the operational end, well, that's what you go to, because salaries are an operational cost. In my mind, so get bad news, you know, there's this much money that's not gonna be available for next year.
And that's currently, I mean, if we looked at the budget right now, that was reflected
In the fund.
It was reflected in our funding that came from the state, so we were anticipating that there would be $90,000 more from the state.
in, so that money will, part of it will just be absorbed.
Yeah, we're gonna have to move forward one way or the other, that money's not showing up. So, there are
It's not
three
fair,
areas.
it's taken away from our collection.
There are three areas that state aid pays for: the collection,
Yeah,
about $35,000 for these supplies, and then we budgeted $150,000 to support moving the salaries by 5%
Yeah.
staff. Now, that can only go to certain employees, it can only go to certified professional librarians. You can't spread it out amongst everybody at JMRL. So those are the choices for where to make this up,
make it up.
basically. You gotta have some money for the supplies, it's only like $35,000 or something. You know, you can't do that, so the choices are really, you know, is it gonna be the collection, or is it gonna be the salary, where we're anticipating that there's flexibility. We have 125 staff members throughout the year. A very wise man once told me that a budget is a snapshot of what the organization's priorities are when we make it. But that throughout the year,
It
it
changes.
doesn't change, you know.
It's worth noting too on the collection side that, right, we are actively removing a significant number of books every year because there's no space. As we're bringing new ones in, we're getting old, and those old ones may not even be that old, right? So, I mean, I guess part of this is the collection page is a little bit more than, but it's not like there's not gonna be books on the shelves.
Yes, there will be books on the shelf, where you would see it, that were not to state aid or to our materials budget. Where you would see it is waiting lists for people, and specifically you would see it for electronic materials, you know. It would be some mix of the two of them, but there's already a great pressure on that collection, because it's a rapidly growing user base, and they're already waiting longer because of the licensing model there. So like that's the, you know, off the top of my cost, like what would happen if we were to take it away from books and materials? In my mind, this is a pretty easy binary discussion. If the budget has to be voted on at the end of June. You know, I hesitate to open up the budget to say, let's go through and figure out where to find this $30,000. I'm offering a way to do that.
And I think too, that in the interest of moving along, that we realize that this is something we've been handed, okay? Not a whole lot we can do. Okay.
I don't wanna know if the board is asking me to prepare something or to do something for June, I wanna know, you know, what specific.
And I don't think there is.
That's was also not something I'm asking about. It was just a general interest in understanding how do we assess the strength of the collection relative to the funding level.
Yeah.
Rather than given a change in funding level, how does that affect the strength of the collection? Rather than given a fixed funding level, what do we do to make this collection as strong as possible? I think we've heard about the second part, but still not really in my mind a lot about the first question.
One thing, you talked about change over time too, is that those costs also go up.
Right.
And that's not a thing.
Yeah.
We could go back to 5 years ago,
Right.
funding, we would get less stuff
Great point.
because of the war.
Yeah.
Okay, this is my report, sorry. Anything else? I think this is a big item to kind of throw into. That's more fun. So another budget update also, it's just that 4 JMR's 5 partner jurisdictions have voted for their budgets, all 4 including full funding, JMR's request. The final vote is in Nelson County on June 10th. So after that, we're done, you have all the information on the JMR budget.
We can start planning for next year.
And yeah, I'm already looking at next year, so 2 other things, summer reading kickoffs are coming up, each branch is having one, we'll be at most of them, the llamas will be back at Central, they did for the housing day, very popular, and in Market Street Park, it was really fun, come to see the llamas. So you all can show up at any of them to sign up for summer reading, any age can join, you get a free tote bag just for signing up. Anytime starting June 2nd, here's a schedule, it's available online that you can, you're out for your own branch. So Nelson's first, May 29th at 1 o'clock. Green is next, June 2nd at 6 in the evening. Louisa's June 3rd at 2, Central's June 7th at 10. Prose's June 9th at 5:30, Gordon Avenue's also June 9th at 6, so you can hurry. I think Marion is actually be at both. Northside is June 10th at 4, and Scottsville is June 10th. And then last bit, good news, pleased to announce that the NAACP JMRL Scholarship Committee has selected 2 finalists for the award this year, thanks to the support of the Friends of the Library. So UVA first year Alyssa Wood will be returning for her final year of eligibility at the Louisa County Library, and Charlottesville High School senior Julia Obiora will be at Northside this summer. So thank you to Alita for helping with that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Other matters? Talk about the agenda items for our June meeting. We'll have a budget vote.
No, this one, yeah, it's coming.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a policy committee.
Yes.
Hopefully there'll be a working group meeting as well. We haven't scheduled one yet, but hopefully between now we've got 5 weeks.
Continuing education from foot?
Sure. Vote on officers for.
Thank you. Right,
26.
hopefully, nominating committee will be able to drag in at least 2 people from somewhere. So. Somebody needs to read this motion so that we can go into a closed session to. Evaluate the director's performance of the project. I can read this, right? No reason I can, sure.
Generally.
Okay, all right, I won't, somebody else, will.
I will.
Thank you.
I move that the library board go into closed meeting pursuant to the Code of Virginia, section 2.2-3711, subsection A1, to discuss the performance evaluation and employment contract of the library director.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Closed. Whereas the Jefferson Madison Regional Library's Board of Trustees has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this Jefferson Madison Regional Library's Board of Trustees that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Jefferson Madison Regional Library's Board of Trustees hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting in which this certification resolution applies, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Jefferson Madison Regional Library's Board of Trustees. We'll now go around the room. Siri. Randy.
Aye.
Martha.
Aye.
Tony. Aye. Mike.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Mary.
Aye.
And Anne. And I noted that Aaliyah Childs was not present during the vote or during the meeting. Great, thank you, everybody.
And you just have to close the.
Motion adjourned.
We did vote on business, but did we re-vote on that in open session? Is that not the case? In past years, we voted on whether to renew the director's contract. If that's the right time if we need to vote on that in open session, I'm prepared to make a motion.
I don't remember.
Last year.
Okay, so let's make a motion.
Because otherwise, how is it known what the
Right.
result of that business was?
Yeah.
Okay, so I move that we renew the library director's contract for a period of 1 year with the same terms and conditions, but including a cost of living raise that is equal to the nominal cost of living raise that other staff members are receiving this year. Is that the correct phrasing?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
You're stuck with us.
Yeah. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Aye.
Well, no.
Forgot.
I just want you to know that you appreciate what you do.
Oh, Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
This is not all business here. So,
Yeah, appreciate it.
and we have a lot of, we're looking forward to a lot of goals. for this coming
I'm
year.
excited.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
I moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you all.
But no, sorry, just